So the Supreme Court has rejected Donald Trump's final appeal. No hearing, no oral arguments, no dissent. A one-line order. The petition for certiorari is denied. 8 words. That's it. The last legal door in the American judicial system just closed, and the court didn't even think it was worth a full sentence of explanation. And within hours of that order being filed, literally within hours, Melania Trump made a series of legal moves that nobody saw coming. Not the prosecution, not Trump's legal team, not the legal commentators who have been covering every twist of this case for months. She filed for divorce, she expanded her cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors, she signed the largest non-fiction book deal in publishing history, and she created a legal trust to protect her son's financial future from the wreckage of his father's empire. All of it coordinated, all of it timed to the minute, all of it according to multiple legal analysts, executed with a level of strategic sophistication that has left the legal world genuinely stunned. And then Warren Buffett weighed in, and this time he wasn't talking about the Constitution or the markets or emergency powers, he was talking about Melania's deal, specifically the structure of it, the timing, the financial architecture. I'll share his exact words later, but the summary is this: he called it the most strategically brilliant personal restructuring he's seen in decades. And he would know, this is the story of a woman who was the silent figure beside the most powerful man in the country for 20 years, who stood beside him through every scandal, every indictment, every crisis, and who in the space of a single afternoon, after the last legal door closed, executed a legal and financial strategy so comprehensive that the entire legal establishment is asking the same question: when did she start planning this? Because this didn't happen in an afternoon. This has been in motion for a very long time. Hit subscribe because the legal and financial implications of what Melania just did are going to reshape everything about how this story ends. Let me start with the appeal rejection, because that's the trigger that set everything in motion. Trump's legal team filed for a writ of certiorari, a formal request for the Supreme Court to hear the case, challenging the 9-0 ruling that barred him from office, the enforcement actions that followed, and the asset seizures that Melania's original testimony had made possible. The petition argued 3 things: that the 14th Amendment application was procedurally flawed, that the insider testimony should have been excluded from the evidentiary record, and that the asset seizures exceeded the scope of the court's original order. It was a comprehensive petition. It raised every legal argument Trump's team could construct, and the court rejected it without a single word of explanation. Cert denied. No hearing scheduled. No justice requesting further briefing. No dissent. No statement respecting the denial. Nothing. 3 of Trump's own appointees, the same 3 who voted with the majority in the original 9-0 ruling, were part of the denial. In legal terms, this is the most definitive form of rejection the Supreme Court can issue. It's not just no, it's we don't even consider this worth discussing. The court's docket shows that the petition was distributed for conference, considered, and denied in a single session. They spent more time last week on a zoning dispute from Ohio than they spent on the former president's final appeal. The rejection has immediate legal consequences. All stays on enforcement are lifted. All pending criminal cases are formally authorized to proceed without further delay. And the asset seizures are confirmed as legally valid, legally permanent, and legally beyond challenge. That was the context. The last door closed. Every legal avenue exhausted. Every argument rejected. Every institution that could have intervened has intervened or declined to. And that is the moment Melania moved. Her legal team filed the first of 4 coordinated actions at 2:47 p.m., less than 3 hours after the Supreme Court's order was published at noon. Legal analysts immediately noted that the filings were too comprehensive, too precisely drafted, and too strategically coordinated to have been prepared in 3 hours. The documents ran to hundreds of pages. The financial structures referenced in the filings had been incorporated months earlier. The property settlement had been pre-negotiated. The cooperating expansion had been pre-drafted. Everything was ready, waiting for one event: the appeal rejection. She wasn't reacting to the appeal rejection, she was waiting for it. Her legal team had these filings chambered like rounds in a magazine, ready to fire the moment the last legal door closed, and the moment it closed, she pulled the trigger on all 4 simultaneously. The first move was the divorce filing. Filed in Florida State Court at 2:47 p.m., citing irreconcilable differences, standard language that tells you nothing about the actual purpose. The strategic significance isn't in the grounds, it's in the timing and the structure. The filing was accompanied by a pre-negotiated property settlement, meaning Melania and her legal team had already determined in advance which assets she would claim as marital property and which assets are subject to federal seizure. The settlement specifically identifies assets that Melania argues were acquired independently of Trump's business operations, personal investments, gifts, income from her own business ventures, and seeks court protection for those assets as separate property. The divorce isn't about the marriage, not really. It's about the assets. By filing the moment the appeal was rejected, Melania's legal team triggered a set of legal protections for marital property that complicate the federal seizure process. In family law, a spouse has independent claims on marital assets that can, in certain circumstances, take priority over federal enforcement actions. Her lawyers are creating a legal firewall between Melania's financial future and Trump's financial collapse, and they did it within 3 hours of the last legal door closing. The second move came within an hour of the divorce filing. Melania's legal team formally notified the Department of Justice that she was voluntarily expanding her cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors. The original agreement, the one that produced the devastating testimony about 14 shell companies, the Swiss account, the 3 sets of books, and the $90 million midnight transfer, was limited in scope. She answered the specific questions the prosecution asked, received immunity for her testimony, and that was the transaction. The expanded agreement is fundamentally different. It's open-ended. Melania is now providing ongoing document production, identifying additional accounts and transactions that weren't covered in the original testimony, and making herself available for continued testimony as the criminal cases proceed to trial. She's not just answering questions anymore. She's volunteering information, documents, records, transaction histories, communications, all of it, on an ongoing basis with no defined endpoint. And in exchange, the expanded cooperation agreement provides additional immunity protections and, critically, a formal government acknowledgement that the assets she's claiming in the divorce proceedings are not subject to federal seizure. She's trading information for financial protection. Every document she hands over strengthens the prosecution's case against Trump and simultaneously strengthens her own claim that her personal assets should be separated from his frozen empire. It's a 2-for-1 deal and both sides benefit. But the divorce and the expanded cooperation were just the first 2 moves. The other 2, the book deal and the trust, are the ones that have legal experts truly stunned, because they represent something nobody expected from Melania Trump: a long-term strategic vision for a post-Trump life that is more financially sophisticated than anything Trump himself ever built. Melania signed a book deal with a major publishing house for a reported $35 million. That's the largest nonfiction advance in publishing history, larger than the reported deals for Barack and Michelle Obama. larger than any presidential memoir, larger than any comparable book in the history of American publishing. The memoir will cover 20 years inside the Trump operation, from the early relationship through the presidency, the post-presidency, and the legal crisis that brought everything down. But the advance itself isn't what stunned the legal experts. The structure is. The $35 million advance was deposited not into Melania's personal account, not into a marital account, and not into any entity connected to the Trump organization. It was deposited into a newly created LLC, a limited liability company classified as Melania's independent intellectual property venture, legally separate from the marital assets, legally separate from the federal seizure orders, legally classified as earned income from Melania's own intellectual labor, which means it cannot be touched by any enforcement action connected to Trump's financial fraud. Her lawyers structured the deal so that every dollar of that $35 million is hers. Cleanly, unambiguously, untouchably hers. And here's the detail that made legal experts actually stop what they were doing and reread the filings. The LLC was incorporated 6 months before the testimony, 6 months before the seizure, 6 months before the appeal. She was building the vehicle for this money before anyone in the public knew she was going to testify. That means she was planning her exit, planning the book, planning the legal structure to protect the income, planning the financial architecture of her post-Trump life while she was still standing beside him at public events, while the world still saw her as the silent spouse, while everyone assumed she was passive. She was incorporating LLCs. The publishing house confirmed that the deal includes unprecedented legal indemnification. Melania will not be personally liable for defamation claims arising from the contents of the memoir. The publisher assumes all legal risk, $35 million, protected from seizure, protected from defamation claims, protected from any Trump family legal challenge, deposited in an entity she created 6 months before anyone knew she was going to testify. That's not a book deal. That's an escape plan with an ISBN number. And then the fourth move, the most emotionally significant one. Melania's legal filings include the creation of an irrevocable trust for their son Barron, funded with assets Melania claims are independently hers, assets that under the terms of the expanded cooperation agreement and the divorce settlement the federal government has acknowledged are not subject to seizure. The trust is structured to be legally untouchable. Irrevocable means it cannot be modified, amended, or dissolved once funded. Not by Melania, not by Trump, not by any court. It protects Barron's educational expenses, living expenses, and long-term financial security from any claims arising from Trump's legal proceedings, from the criminal penalties that will follow conviction, and from the restitution orders that will consume whatever remains of the Trump empire. This is a mother looking at the financial wreckage of her husband's empire, the seized properties, the frozen accounts, the criminal penalties that will eat whatever's left, and building a wall around her son's future. Whatever happens to Trump, whatever the courts take, whatever the penalties amount to, Barron is protected. Legal experts noted that the trust structure is unusually aggressive in its protections, designed to withstand challenges not just from the federal government but from Trump himself and from his other children and their potential claims. She's not just protecting Barron from the government, she's protecting him from his father's creditors, from his father's other family members, from every possible source of future claims. She is building a legal fortress around her son, and she designed it to hold against attacks from every direction. Each move reinforces the others. The divorce creates the legal separation. The cooperation buys government protection for that separation. The book deal generates protected income classified as hers alone. And the trust makes sure the most important thing, her son's future, is protected no matter what happens next. One legal analyst told NBC, "I've been practicing family law for 30 years. I have never seen a coordinated legal strategy this sophisticated, executed this quickly. Every move was timed, every filing was pre-prepared, and every structure was designed to interlock with the others. Whoever designed this strategy is operating at the highest level of legal practice in this country." And that assessment, the highest level of legal practice in this country, is exactly why legal experts are stunned. Because this level of planning doesn't come from a woman who decided to leave her husband last Tuesday. This has been in motion for months, possibly years. Let me explain why legal experts are using the word unprecedented. Because they're not using it lightly. The timing innovation alone is something attorneys are going to study for years. Filing the divorce immediately after the appeal rejection is tactically significant for a reason that's easy to miss. The appeal rejection finalized all enforcement orders. That means the universe of seized assets is now legally defined. It's a fixed known quantity that cannot expand. By filing the divorce after the seizure is complete, Melania ensures that the court must evaluate her marital claims against a fixed pool, rather than a moving target where the government could potentially seize additional assets during the divorce proceedings. One attorney described the approach as filing on the rubble, waiting until the destruction is complete, then staking your claim on what remains. It's a strategy that requires extraordinary patience and extraordinary confidence that the destruction will eventually be total. Melania had both. The cooperation as currency model is even more innovative. Legal experts noted that Melania has pioneered what one professor at Georgetown Law called a new model of witness cooperation. In traditional cooperation agreements, the transaction is simple, the witness testifies, receives immunity, and the relationship ends. What Melania's legal team has done is turn cooperation into an ongoing exchange. Every new document she provides, every new piece of testimony she offers, every additional transaction she identifies, all of it simultaneously strengthens the prosecution's criminal case against Trump and strengthens her civil claims on the assets she's seeking in the divorce. She's the prosecution's most valuable witness and her own most effective financial advocate at the same time. And this creates a structural incentive alignment that legal scholars are calling genuinely unprecedented. The government wants to protect Melania's assets because doing so ensures her continued cooperation. If her assets are seized, her incentive to keep cooperating diminishes. If her assets are protected, she keeps talking. The government needs her. She needs the government. Every dollar the court allows her to keep gives her more reason to keep providing evidence. It's a mutually reinforcing loop, and it was designed that way from the beginning. Legal historians are searching for precedent and coming up empty. Some have compared it to Ivana Trump's 1991 divorce, but Ivana's case was a straightforward property dispute with no criminal dimension, no cooperation agreement, no memoir deal, and no irrevocable trust. Others have compared it to strategies used by spouses of convicted organized crime figures, but those cases involve far simpler asset structures and never included the interlocking elements Melania deployed. There is no direct precedent for what Melania Trump did today. Legal databases have been searched. Academic literature has been reviewed. Conference calls have been happening all afternoon between law professors at the country's top institutions. Nobody has ever combined a divorce filing, an expanded criminal cooperation agreement, a protected memoir deal, and an irrevocable child trust into a single coordinated strategy filed in the same afternoon. It is, in the literal and technical sense of the word, unprecedented. And here's what's most striking about the legal community's reaction. The surprise isn't just about the strategy, it's about who executed. For 20 years, Melania Trump was perceived as passive, the silent wife, the reluctant first lady, the woman who stood beside the most overwhelming personality in American politics and never said a word. That perception is now completely demolished. What she executed today, the timing, the coordination, the legal architecture, the months of quiet preparation, reveals someone who has been thinking several moves ahead for far longer than anyone realized. She wasn't passive, she was patient. And those are very, very different things. Legal analysts are now re-examining everything about Melania's behavior over the past several years through a different lens. The prenuptial renegotiations during the presidency, renegotiated at least twice, each time with Melania gaining more independent financial protections, no longer look like a wife extracting concessions from a distracted husband. They look like the early moves in a long-term strategy. The separate legal team she retained, the quiet withdrawal from public events over the past year, the absence from the Civil War rally. It all looks different now. Every piece of it looks like preparation. Patient, disciplined, invisible preparation for a moment she could see coming long before anyone else. And nobody understands preparation. The patient, strategic, years-long construction of a position before the decisive moment arrives, better than Warren Buffett. For 20 years, Melania's role was to be present. That was the function. Stand beside him. Project normalcy. Never comment. Never contradict. Never break the illusion of a stable, united family behind the most chaotic political figure of the century. She was the most effective political asset Trump ever had, and the most underestimated. Because everyone looked at her silence and saw compliance. Nobody looked at her silence and saw calculation. Her public appearances were carefully managed to project loyalty while revealing nothing of what she actually thought, observed, or knew. In retrospect, that skill, the ability to be present at the center of power while revealing absolutely nothing, looks less like passivity and more like information discipline. She was watching, she was listening, she was remembering, and she was telling no one. The testimony was the first crack in that facade. The hidden accounts, the 3 sets of books, the midnight transfer, the devastating closing line. He told everyone what he wanted them to believe, including me. But even that testimony, as devastating as it was reactive. She testified because the legal walls closed in and cooperation was the only option that didn't end in her own prosecution. Today's moves are fundamentally different. Today, Melania is not reacting. She is acting. The shield didn't speak. The witness spoke when compelled. The strategist speaks on her own terms, on her own timeline, in service of her own objectives. The strategy she executed today required lawyers, financial advisors, a literary agent, and a family law team all working in coordination for months. You don't incorporate an LLC 6 months before your husband's empire collapses by accident. You don't have a pre-negotiated property settlement ready to file 3 hours after a Supreme Court order by improvising. You don't structure a $35 million book deal with unprecedented legal protections and an irrevocable trust for your son in an afternoon of panic phone calls. This woman has been building this moment brick by brick, in silence, while the entire world watched her husband and assumed she was invisible. The woman the world dismissed as an accessory just executed the most sophisticated personal financial restructuring in modern American legal history. And when Warren Buffett saw the details of what she'd done, he didn't talk about Trump. He didn't talk about the appeal rejection. He didn't talk about the Constitution or the markets. He talked about Melania. Buffett released a statement through Berkshire Hathaway's investor channel. He wrote, "I have spent 70 years evaluating deals. I have studied restructurings, acquisitions, and strategic repositioning across every industry and every context. The restructuring Melania Trump executed today is, in terms of strategic sophistication, timing, and structural elegance, among the most impressive personal financial maneuvers I have observed in my career." He broke down the strategy in financial terms. She identified a narrow window, the period between the finalization of enforcement orders and the initiation of divorce proceedings, and executed a 4-part strategy that simultaneously protects her assets, generates new protected income, secures ongoing government cooperation, and shields her son's future. Each component reinforces the others. Each filing was timed to maximize the legal protections of the one before it. That is not the work of an afternoon. That is the product of months of careful preparation by a highly skilled legal and financial team operating at the highest level. Buffett didn't call it brave, he didn't call it moral, he didn't call it principled, he called it impressive. That's a different kind of assessment. And from Buffett, a man who has spent 7 decades judging the quality of strategic thinking, it might be the highest one possible. He estimated Melania's total protected position, assets separated via divorce, the book advance, the trust, additional assets acknowledged as independent by the government under the expanded cooperation agreement, at between $70 and $100 million. To put that in context, the Trump empire, after seizure and debt, has a net value of approximately $400 million, most of which will be consumed by criminal penalties, restitution, and legal fees. Melania, through legal strategy alone, may emerge from this with a larger personal fortune than Trump retains after the courts are finished with him. He specifically noted the LLC, the creation of an independent entity to receive the book advance, incorporated 6 months before the testimony. That is foresight. That is someone who understood well before the public did where this situation was heading, and who positioned herself accordingly. And he closed with a line that frames the entire Trump collapse. In my experience, the people who survive financial catastrophes are not the ones with the most money. They are the ones who saw the catastrophe coming earliest and prepared most quietly. By that measure, Melania Trump is the most successful financial strategist in this entire saga. He connected her strategy to a broader pattern. What we are seeing is the final stage of what I would call empire disaggregation, the process by which every person connected to a failed enterprise extracts themselves and their assets from the wreckage. The senators left first, then the justices ruled, then the staff resigned, then the inner circle testified, and now the spouse has executed the most comprehensive personal extraction in the history of American political life. And then the line that might define the entire series: everyone leaves. The only question is whether they leave smart or leave desperate. Melania left smart. Financial analysts noted that Melania's strategy has broader implications for how high-profile cooperation deals are structured in the future. The cooperation as currency model, trading ongoing information for ongoing asset protection, is already being discussed in legal journals and at white-collar defense conferences as a potential template. One former federal prosecutor told CNN, "Every defense attorney in the country is reading these filings tonight. This is going to become a model. When you have a cooperating witness with independent asset claims, this is how you do it." The publishing industry too is recalibrating. The $35 million advance, structured through a protected LLC, has established a new ceiling for what memoir deals can look like when the subject has both unprecedented access and unprecedented legal protections. Literary agents are already calling it the most consequential book deal in decades, not just for the dollar amount, but for the legal architecture that protects it. Buffett added one final observation that cut deeper than any financial analysis. I have often said that you learn the most about people not during their successes but during their crises. In this crisis, the person who learned the most, adapted the fastest, and positioned herself most effectively was the person everyone dismissed. That should tell us something about the dangers of underestimation. When you look at Melania's exit alongside every other exit, every walkout, every ruling, every resignation, every act of testimony, you see the final shape of a pattern that has been building from the beginning. Pence's exit was principled but unplanned. He refused one unconstitutional demand and nearly died for it. No strategy, no financial positioning, just conscience under duress. Barr's exit was reactive. He told one truth, was discarded overnight, and spent years trying to rebuild his reputation. No advanced planning. Kelly and Mattis left on principle, told the truth publicly, and were branded traitors, courageous but costly, with no strategic component. The White House staff's exit was the first that showed planning. They resigned, left evidence behind, cooperated. The evidence was intentional. That was the beginning of strategic exits. The Inner Circle witnesses' exit was deeply strategic. The immunity deal, the timing coordinated with the Civil War statement, the 6 hours of testimony that changed history. And Melania's exit is the culmination. A fully realized, multi-dimensional strategy prepared over months, executed in a single afternoon, protecting not just herself but her son, generating new income, and maintaining the prosecution's most valuable ongoing cooperating relationship. Every person eventually left. But the evolution is striking. The early exits were reactive, people forced out by conscience or circumstance with no plan for what came next. The later exits were increasingly strategic, planned, lawyered, timed. And Melania's exit is the final iteration. Comprehensive, sophisticated, and designed to extract maximum value from the act of leaving itself. Nobody wants to be the first person to leave. But if you're going to be the last, you might as well be the best prepared. And she was. The common thread in every exit is the same realization. The cost of staying exceeds the cost of leaving. But what Melania understood that others didn't, or understood earlier and more clearly, is that the cost of leaving can be managed. You don't have to leave with nothing. You don't have to leave desperate. If you plan carefully enough, if you prepare quietly enough, if you wait for exactly the right moment and execute with precision, you can leave with your assets protected, your future secured, your son's future secured, and your leverage fully intact. That's not heroism, it's strategy. And in the end, strategy survived more effectively than heroism. The Trump operation demanded loyalty above all else, and one by one every person in that operation discovered the same truth. Loyalty to Trump is a depreciating asset. The longer you hold it, the less it's worth, and the longer you wait to trade it, the worse your terms will be. Melania held her loyalty longer than almost anyone, but she also traded it on better terms than anyone, because she understood something that took everyone else years to learn. The exit was always coming. The only variable was the price. So where does this leave Donald Trump? The Supreme Court has rejected his final appeal. His assets are seized. His wife has filed for divorce and is actively cooperating with the prosecution on an ongoing open-ended basis. His son's financial future has been legally separated from his own. The criminal cases are proceeding. The brand is worthless. He is for the first time in his adult life genuinely alone. Not performatively alone. Not strategically alone. Alone. The last person who shared his name just took legal action to stop sharing it. Everyone leaves. Buffett was right about that. The senators left, the justices ruled against him, the staff resigned, the inner circle testified, and now his wife, the woman who stood beside him longer than anyone, through more scandals and crises than anyone else endured, has filed for divorce, expanded her cooperation, signed a memoir deal that will tell the world everything she saw, and built a legal fortress around their son to ensure that at least one member of the family emerges from the wreckage with a future intact. The question everyone is asking now is, who is Melania Trump? For 20 years, the public saw what she wanted them to see. The silent figure, the reluctant first lady, the woman behind the sunglasses who never gave interviews and never broke character. And now, in the space of a single afternoon, a different person has emerged. Not a hero, not a villain, something more interesting than either. A strategist. Someone who watched, waited, cataloged, remembered, prepared, and then, when the moment was exactly right, executed a plan so comprehensive that the entire legal establishment is studying it like a case file. Whether you admire her or condemn her, and reasonable people will do both, you can no longer underestimate her, and you can no longer dismiss her as an accessory to someone else's story. As of today, she is the author of her own. And here's the uncomfortable truth about this moment. The people who defied Trump out of principle, Pence, Barr, Kelly, Mattis, the staffers who resigned, most of them paid an enormous personal price. Death threats, career destruction, family disruption, years of public vilification. Melania defied Trump out of strategy. And she'll likely emerge from the wreckage in a stronger financial position than any of them. Principle costs more than strategy. That's not a moral lesson anyone wants to learn. It's a structural one. And it's worth sitting with. The Supreme Court rejected the last appeal. 8 words on a piece of paper. The petition for certiorari is denied. And within hours, the person who knew him best, who stood beside him longest, who saw everything and said nothing for 20 years, that person filed for divorce, expanded her cooperation, signed a $35 million book deal, and built an irrevocable trust for her son. She was the last one standing beside him. And she left